Hello, and welcome to PerchPeek Pods, the only podcast where you get long form interviews with some of the world's best global mobility leaders. And wow, we've got an amazing leader with us today. Jack, welcome to the podcast. Introduce yourself to the community and tell us the fascinating story of how you fell into the world of mobility, because this is a good
Yeah,
one.
yeah, great. Thanks, Paul, and thanks for inviting me.
Oh, not
Really
at all.
looking forward to this discussion. So, yeah, let me start with how I got into mobility, but it's really um, I had a major position in HR with a major pharmaceutical company with Wyeth Pharmaceuticals, and I was with them, I guess, a little bit over 20 years. Um, and while there, I was in all the different areas of HR, total rewards, staffing, recruitment, employee relations, and a lot of, different strategic HR jobs, very senior level. And one of my responsibilities was global mobility. But that was just one, of the areas that I covered. So I started out really understanding the business. A lot of people in mobility started in mobility and they continue in mobility. But I was kind of backwards in this, is that I learned about the business. I was involved in the business with finance and all the different areas, of the corporation of Wyeth. And um, probably would have stayed with them very successfully, but unfortunately, Pfizer acquired us
Yeah,
about 12 years ago.
yeah,
And it was pretty much they took over our company, and all the Wyeth people, or a majority of Wyeth people, were let go.
yeah,
And I was lucky enough at that time, with really no spread of time or anything, to find this job with a great company, with Stryker.
yeah.
And it was 100% mobility. So it was an area I was very familiar with, and it seemed like there was a lot of opportunities in this position at Stryker.
Nice.
So that's kind of how I got into mobility. It was a small part of my job while at Wyeth, and then full time.
Yes, I love
Yeah.
that.
So
I
yeah.
love that. And as you say, a very unusual path to go from general into specific with mobility. That does give you a unique perspective. And I said we were going to go off script, so we're going straight off script here. So you mentioned that mobility was something you were familiar with when you were started at Striker, but it had never been your dedicated role. What was your
Mhm.
perception of mobility before sort of starting to do it full time?
Yeah. While I was with Wyeth, because I had so many different responsibilities,
Yeah,
we were fully outsourced,
yeah.
and which is different than when I say fully outsourced today, and I'll talk about that in a minute. At that point, it was really our supplier partners just took care of everything.
Yeah.
We were not involved in anything because you
Mm,
had so many other responsibilities.
yeah.
Okay, so you couldn't even concentrate on employee experience. You couldn't concentrate on claims. You didn't have your hands into to anything unless there was some major issue that comes up and it, floats up to the
Yeah.
top. But other than that, back then, it was different. Mobility was different. You were outsourced, and pretty much that company, the RMC, ran the whole
Everything.
operation.
Yeah.
And today it's different because employee experience is so important, pricing is so important. So even if you have other responsibilities, you still have to have your hand uh,
Uh,
in the process as well.
I love that, and I'm looking forward to digging into pricing being important and employee experience being important, and what that tangibly means. But tell me when you say it's sort of different, in the sense of was your perception of mobility that it was just very expensive, a necessary evil, something that was amazing for talent attraction, talent retention, and how did that change when you started
Yeah,
doing it full time?
yeah. I think it's quite the opposite. I think we spent more on relocation years ago, and
Yeah.
today I think companies are watching those dollars a lot more. And for example, what I'll say is that while at Wyeth, we had the home sales benefit, and it almost went to almost every employee. I mean,
Really?
from manager level, it was almost an automatic.
Wow.
Uh, and we had temp living, and
Yeah,
whereas today you're starting to see more companies go to home sale just for their more
exact.
senior level.
Yeah.
And again, I always say this is that because a lot of people say, well, that's not true for my company. That's right, because it's not true for every single
Yes.
company. I'm just trying to talk about trends
Yes.
of what I'm seeing, but
Yeah.
you definitely are seeing more cost conscious
Yes.
today. I mean, procurement was never involved
Hmm.
15, 20 years ago with
Yeah.
mobility. Now you're seeing them involved
All
in,
the
in
time.
many companies.
Yeah.
So there's a lot more, visibility and looking at what we're doing in mobility.
Yes.
And the other big part is you didn't hear too much about strategy or strategic years ago.
Interesting.
You were basically, this is what they get them from point A to point B,
Yeah.
and that's what it was about. But today you hear a lot more about strategy. So
Yes. I
those
love
are the
that.
big differences.
Too
Yeah.
too many things to jump into, but one of the things I can think of no better person to explain is, so this podcast is listened in over 35 countries, and with lots of people who are maybe newer to the mobility space, and so are probably listening and saying, "What is a home sale program?" So just tell the listeners what you mean when you say a home sale program is available to everybody moving.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. Yeah, home sale program meant that the company would cover normal and customary closing costs for that employee when they sell their
Yeah,
home, and that includes their sales commission.
yeah,
So that's a big number. So that was a very expensive, benefit.
yeah,
So that's what it is. It's really to cover the closing costs that
yeah.
the employee
Which
goes, and it's usually about 12 to 15% of the price of your sale of the home. That's kind of an
exactly.
estimate, yeah, of
Exactly.
how
So
much
if
it
it's
costs. Yeah,
it can easily get north of $1 million. Sorry, $1 million, hundred
yeah,
thousand dollars. That benefit alone, which is so it is an expensive benefit, and definitely a huge trend of that becoming sort of mainly reserved for C-suite, if at all.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
and it's particularly outside of the US is increasingly rare. Tell us about the actually where to go first. Tell us about your views on procurement becoming involved in the process, and how we try to maintain employee experience as costs become such a stringent factor.
Yeah, this is a great topic, procurement, and everyone likes to blame procurement.
Mm. In
And it's
defensive
like,
procurement, I like
pro,
this.
well, in defense, but managing procurement.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
If it's a hands off approach and procurement just handles the whole thing, then shame on you.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
But if you educate them, okay, on how costs are associated, how costs for an RMC are derived, and things like that, they're just doing their job. Okay.
Exactly.
And a lot of times you'll hear, well, procurement's driving the entire process. But
Yes.
the more corporate people you talk to, it's not true. The corporate manager has to be driving the process. It's more
Yeah.
than just cost, but they have to be good at managing procurement.
Yeah.
And I think, if it's hands off, then yeah, it's going to be a tough challenge for you.
Yeah.
If you're able to explain the importance of employee experience and different factors, you're the one that's going to be working with
Yeah.
this
Exactly.
supplier at the end of the
Exactly.
day.
Yeah.
So it's really up to the relocation
Exactly.
manager. And I
Yeah.
know, a lot of suppliers will say, but we can't get through procurement. And,
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's just a
Yeah,
process.
and
Yeah.
I'm going to put you on the spot here, Jack, because I completely agree with you that procurement are just doing their jobs, and they are nearly always working across multiple categories. And I'm just going to say it: pricing in relocations from RMCs is quite confusing a lot of the time. There's a lot of different fees. So, how would you try and explain how RMC pricing works to a procurement lead that has never worked with relocation before.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing that I would do if there's an RFP, and I've gone through some RFIs,
Yeah,
um, procurement looks at the budgets and they see whatever $50 million
yeah,
spent in
ex-
relocation, okay, and they see it next to your RMC.
yeah,
So in their mind, they're seeing a big spend to the RMC. Okay,
yeah,
so the first thing I always do is I break it out to
yeah,
show, how much of it was household goods, how much of it was our
hmm
lump sum. It's the policy pieces that cost the most. There are
yes,
policies.
yeah,
The RMC's charge is after you take all that out.
yeah,
Okay. So, but then, you do have to explain the referral fees to the procurement person. How does the RMC make money if they're making so little from us? I think an
yes,
RMC's fees are about 3% of the overall relocation budget.
yeah, yeah,
It's about that. So how do they make money then? And that's where you have to, be able to explain that to procurement.
yeah,
Um, you know,
100%. And
yeah.
are you trying to sort of? I like the idea of breaking it out because, as you say, as a sort of someone who runs an RMC, the last thing you want is someone thinking your company is making $50 million, because then they're like, "We'll take a sweet 10-20% haircut," and it's, you could definitely stomach that. You're like, okay, well, we still need to pay for household goods or temporary accommodation or whatever. So
Exactly.
I like that. I like that process a lot. And then tell us then. So and then you've got them on side, you're taking them on the journey. How are you trying to explain to them or to others outside of mobility uh, how to maintain a good employee experience? Because I know that's something you're extremely passionate about, and often people in the community say, but like, all people care about is the cost, and it's really hard to explain about
Well,
the employee experience.
what's interesting about cost is that, for the most part, your household goods movers have contracts with your RMCs. So
Yeah,
United has a contract, Atlas has a contract, and their fees are pretty much very similar to your
yeah,
big companies. Okay. And so what I do is just advise them that we utilize the RMC to be able to then select whatever uh, supplier makes sense to them. But what I think is very important for employee experience is that if you're a big enough company, and you can't do this if you're a small company, is that you have preferred suppliers
yeah,
for like your household goods, your temp living, because you still have to be able to, they have to learn your culture, they have to
hmm
know how you think, okay, to be able to give a good employee experience. I've always said
yeah.
is, employee experience is number one, service recovery is number two.
I love that. I love that.
Okay. And that's the way my model works. I have preferred suppliers
Yeah,
and they know my culture. They're not afraid to come to me.
yeah,
Okay.
I love that.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, my RMC, my team, most of the team's been with me the whole 10 years, but I always tell them before they say no to something that doesn't feel right, if it doesn't
Yeah,
feel right to them,
yeah,
reach out to me.
I love that.
Okay. Don't make it black and white that every person is exactly the same. If
Yeah,
something doesn't feel right, reach out to me. And 99.9% of the time, I agree with the consultant,
yeah, I love that.
you
I love
know,
that.
and they're not hiding it. They trust me. And,
Yeah,
and I think that's the big difference,
yeah. And I
with
think
people.
the one big takeaway for me there is a being so open to feedback, but B, having those preferred suppliers as well, and not treating the RMC as a complete gatekeeper that's a black box that you don't have any visibility. Obviously, if you're running a sort of a fully outsourced program where you have no bandwidth, fine, fair enough. But
Right.
actually, it's not a problem to have some direct contact with suppliers, and it can just speed things up, truthfully, at
Yeah.
times as well.
and it helps you during the summer
Yeah,
times, you know. But again, the caveat is you have to have the volume to be
exactly.
able to justify that,
Yes,
you
I
know.
I
Yeah,
completely agree with that. Yeah, you can't sort
yeah,
of go around demanding things too much if you're sort of doing one move a year into
right.
a remote location. Um, Jack, one of the well, anyone listening to this, if you don't already follow Jack on LinkedIn, I highly recommend going onto LinkedIn right now and chucking him a follow because your content is brilliant and extremely straightforward, and that's one of the reasons why I was looking forward to having you on the pod. And you recently posted and hosted a couple of sessions on challenges for our industry. So we're
Yeah.
looking at the impact of remote work and the reduction in volume that that's caused for our industry, and something you mentioned already, which is almost a reduction in spend per relocation, fewer moves and a bit of reduction in spend per relocation. Um, how were those sessions? How many people did
Yeah.
you have attend? Give us a
Yeah.
sneak peek of what was discussed in those sort of challenges for the
Yeah.
industry sessions.
Yeah, that was it. Really pleasantly surprised me.
Yeah,
We had probably close to well, we had over 200. It was like 240 people, and so I held
amazing.
two sessions, and we had well over 100 in each session.
Yeah,
Both sessions were similar but different because you had different people on there.
yeah,
And I think a lot of it was around the reduction in business, okay, with
yes,
third parties. A lot was around that. And of course, you're going to get certain businesses that are doing very well still.
yeah,
But I was talking more about, organic growth, where
yeah,
comparing, not because you got new business, but
yeah,
comparing what you had to what you have now. And
exactly.
that's the true, signifier.
Yes,
Because otherwise, yeah, people are going to say, "Oh, yeah, our business is up." Well, you got
yeah,
this big company or something,
exactly, exactly. It's like
Um,
size of the overall pie. If it's moved around within
exactly,
the pie, fine, that's
exactly.
something. But like
Yeah.
net is the pie growing or shrinking? And it sounds like the feedback was actually it feels like there's a few less moves.
Yeah,
I
and
find.
I think and the two again, what I believe are the two biggest factors. Are number one is cost. Number
Yeah,
one is, and I think it's got even more critical after COVID. I think companies really learned that they can save a lot of money in different ways. Travel was one big one, and I think
yeah,
that opened up their eyes, of how much they can save, and that happened
yeah,
during COVID. And what you found was the other one is, I believe, remote work.
yeah,
And again, remote work, when I talk about that, that's really talking about someone that lives too far to commute to the office.
yes,
They got hired that way. That's where they're living, and that's who's out there. Now there's companies that are saying we're bringing people back to the office, but those are the hybrid people, I think,
yeah,
starting off. Those are the people that were in the office. Okay. Now we're asking them to come back in the office.
yeah,
So that's going on, but you still have these large numbers that were hired remotely
yeah,
that, the only time that's going to change is if that person leaves and then you
yeah,
hire locally.
yeah,
Because if the most people that you talk to that were hired to work remote will not just now pick up and move closer to the company because
yeah,
they may have a spouse that's
yeah,
working. They made their decision based on working remotely. Their kids are in
yes,
school. So I think, everyone's used to cyclical, but I'm
yeah,
not sure this is cyclical. I'm not
yes,
sure, it's not like the stock market. And a lot of people are
yes.
saying it's because of the presidential election coming up. It'll change after that. Yeah,
Interesting. So you're
but
sort of saying this is late 90s DVD, physical DVDs, actually that's going to be sort of distribution dropped. Actually, the whole market is some extent, reduced forever rather than a sort of a temporary boom or bust.
yeah, I believe, again, there's going to be a lot of companies have big
Yeah,
projects and
of course.
acquisitions and everything else. But I think even a 20% drop in business is major.
Yeah,
That's major.
yeah,
Okay. So the big thing with the meeting was getting people, don't wait. Okay, don't wait for this a cycle to end. Think
Yeah.
about, what is your business? Do you have other avenues to go into?
Hmm.
Like temp living is a good example that, even if their relocation business goes down, they're in other areas as well.
hundred
You
percent.
know, it could be, the regular consumer business. It could be your intern business. It could
Yeah.
be, working with different industries. And I think that's where RMCs have to work uh, as well.
Yeah. I love that.
Um, because
Yeah, I
as
love that.
these, that's the way it needs
Exactly.
to work. So it was
Exactly. And
really just to open eyes, really.
yeah, and it sounds like an incredible discussion, and,
Yeah,
amazing to have 200 plus industry folk jumping in, sharing stories. But I would definitely agree with it. It's always linked to what you mentioned earlier about home sale becoming much less common. As like, home sale is almost by definition a relocation only benefit. Like, you're not going to have
right.
consumer home sale really. That's just pay, having a break. It's like a kind of it's only really for corporate relocation. Whereas actually, lots of the benefits can be repurposed. Housing, household goods, even to some extent, destination services. It's like people are still moving around. It's just a style of support is very different. And I think it was just having a great conversation with Michael Piker from who's sort of ex Flutter, and saying typically, maybe historically, expats for like 3 to 5% of the employee population, but actually, if you can bring in interns or grads or foreign local hires or whatever it might be, even employee driven moves, you can up that still. It's just you're not going to be giving them traditional
Exactly.
benefits packages.
Yes,
So it's sort of
exactly.
it's more
Yeah.
of a slight volume or new style of relocation. So that sounds like there were some challenges thrown out in terms of volume in the industry. What ideas were thrown out for um, you know increasing mobility's relevance given the challenge of slightly reduced volume across the industry?
Yeah, and I guess this is where my business acumen comes in.
I love it.
It's pretty hard to convince a finance person who is looking at budget numbers, okay, to say to them, well, the return on investment is important,
Yes.
okay, so we should spend or overspend or whatever. And in a finance person's mind, it's black and white to them. They're
Yeah.
being held to the fire according to what is being reported. The company is being held to the fire
Yeah.
every quarter when they have to make their numbers
Yeah.
to Wall Street. Okay. So we have that difficult, challenge, although we, can have these soft savings that we can say, the faster an employee gets somewhere and
Yeah.
is happy, there's savings to that,
Yes.
but you can't put that on a budget line.
Yes.
Okay,
It's a hidden saver.
so that's the difficulty that you're up against, and when you're talking to real people, you're just preaching to the choir. you
That's it.
know I understand it, and everything else
Yeah.
we're preaching to me, but the difficulty is with finance, which is true numbers,
Yes.
that they're looking at.
Yeah. And
So,
so, yeah. And how do you make that case to finance then?
yeah, yeah, it's
Look, what, you know,
it's really a department's budget.
yeah.
Okay, it's not. How do I say this? It's not really our responsibility to convince the business. The
Yeah.
business has their budget. They know what's best for them. I
Mm,
don't like to get in the way of the business.
yeah.
If they want to do lump sums, and now we're starting to see a lot more lump
Yeah.
sums because of budgetary reasons, that's up to them.
Yeah.
Okay? There's no data that will show that lump sum employees will leave faster than someone who gets full
Yeah.
relocation.
Yeah. Or
There's
you
going
have
to
to
be,
find that data, or you need to
yeah,
find like
or,
the hiring.
you can find that data in both ways. I always say,
Yeah.
it's interesting when you look at data. it depends who is reporting the data
Yeah, that's true.
on what
Always
you
important to see
see.
who produced the survey.
Exactly. Who produced the survey? So, yeah, it's hard for us to justify it.
Yeah.
Although we know in our minds, yes, a happier employee will be more productive.
Yeah, and it's
You know,
interesting because it's more productive that, but there's almost so many ways you can try and shake it down. You can say greater opening up the talent pool to some extent for people who want to relocate. You can say increased offer acceptance rate. You can say increased retention. You can say increased performance, more commitment. There are lots of different ways you can shake it down, but I think the important thing, as you say, is actually do try to make that like hard quantitative analysis in some ways, because otherwise you are going to get eaten alive by someone in finance who's like, I get that employee experience is important, but here's a tangible hard cost associated, and you're not even trying to quantify that
exactly.
productivity saving or talent acquisition saving. So even if it's hard to find the data, pull it together, because at least you have then some numbers to justify
Right.
against finance. The well, out of interest, I know people will be interested. You managed to persuade 200 plus people to come onto Zooms with you. What was it like organizing Zooms with 100 plus people and trying to sort of, I know mobility people are a sociable bunch, so there must have been questions flying in from all corners. How did you manage that?
Yeah, you know what? I kind of just winged it. I'm going to be real
Nice, I
honest
love that.
with you. I'm going to be real honest with you. I did not know how it was going to go. The
Yeah,
only thing I did have one person that was kind of helping me monitor the chats.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah, yeah,
Other than that, I asked people to raise their hand,
yeah,
and they helped me in who was next and
yeah,
everything. Um, I mean, but most people like to listen.
yeah,
To be honest, you're going to have, your top 10 probably that
yeah,
will constantly be speaking and asking
yeah.
questions. But I think most of the people there to listen. And the other thing I was trying to get to was that making people understand that they're not alone.
A
Okay.
hundred
When
percent.
they're hearing these things, they're also saying, you know what, it's not just me.
A hundred
Okay.
percent.
And I think the other thing that was important, I spoke about salespeople and business development, saying it's not your fault. It's not the business development person's fault.
Yeah.
It's the company that's got to differentiate themselves and give you with something you can sell.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay, and it's not good enough to just because you see poor business development people, they get laid off, they go to another company, they get laid off,
Yeah.
they go to another company, but it's the company that has to give you the tools on what you're
Yeah.
selling.
And innovate and offer modern solutions, and
Yeah,
not try
solutions
and
and
push the
right.
same old solutions that don't fit
Yeah.
the modern sort of style of
Yeah,
program.
and what I said is I believe that AI is gonna whoever kicks off AI in some fashion different than just answering questions. I'm not talking
Exactly.
about calling and answering. I mean AI in a fashion that does audits or
Yes.
some way. Okay,
Yeah.
those are the companies that are going to stand out.
Yeah, yeah, I love that dissection. Wasn't expecting to get onto AI in this one, but I think that is so true. Sort of right now, and this is true at PerchPeek as well. There's a lot of speeding up existing workflows, so answering questions, analyzing data, etc. But it's largely, you know, using things to like speed up existing processes rather than truly like just completely eliminating a process that used to be done. And I think I wrote a blog post earlier this year. I'm pretty excited in a lot of the immigration spaces for
Okay.
some of the AI tooling there, and we're looking at a few things in that space just to be, because so much of that is rinse and repeat at times,
Hmm.
and is quite high fee. So yeah, that's an exciting time. We've drifted nicely into opportunities there, Jack, and so you're sort
Hmm.
of looking at from a differentiator at a company level, AI for sure, which I think everyone would agree. What about an industry level? Where do you think opportunities are for the industry to have more impact over over the next 5 years, rather than just maybe recede even further?
Wow, that's a tough question.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I'm not
Exactly.
sure I can even answer. That's
Uh,
like, what does it look like? To be honest with you, I think it's going to look very much the same
hmm
in 5 years from now, with the exception of technology and AI,
Yes.
okay, coming more into place. But even with technology, so many times a company will develop something because they feel we need it,
Yeah.
okay, rather than having focus groups and
Yes.
understanding where's our pain,
A
okay,
hundred
and
percent.
not telling us where our pain is after you made the product and now don't understand why you're not selling it.
Yeah, exactly. Or building something, trying to charge for it without necessarily it actually being a live pain point or
Yeah.
aligning with any budget. And I think I'm not sure in product development, there's the sort of problems to be solved methodology, and it is, what is the problem you're trying to solve here? Like it
Yeah.
might look pretty or it might be cool, but it's like if there's not actually a problem there, it's probably not that
Right.
that that useful, right? And I think there can be, and we've certainly been guilty of this at times of over engineering.
Yeah,
So
and I
you
think,
use
yeah,
go
no, and
ahead.
I think the other area that there has to be a change in is pricing, to make money
Mm,
in the industry. We saw it in the household goods where we scratched our head for 10 years. We didn't really see big price increases, and then all of a sudden, in the last 3 or 4 years, there were some big price increases because all of a sudden they figured out we're not making money or we're not
yeah.
making enough money.
Yes.
So I think that has to come about. There has to be some way for this industry to figure out what is the appropriate pricing for
Mm,
their products. Okay,
yes.
where I was on a call and I said you have to price. Why are we different than any other business that prices to make money?
Yeah.
And procurement came up. I said, well, they're just doing their job.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Uh, if you price right, then it should work.
Yeah.
But if everybody's afraid because they're going to lose business, well,
Yes.
then shame on you. We
Yeah.
can't solve that.
100%, and I think it's
Yeah.
the at some point you have to. I can sort of say this as a sort of an owner, you have to sort of know your own cost structure, know what you can do, know because ultimately, like, and this is for anyone who's in discussions with procurement. They want you to be a sustainable partner as well. No one goes through an RFP to choose someone with the lowest prices only for them to go out of business in a year.
Right.
And that's what we always say. Look, this is
Right.
the reason our prices are the way they are. We want to be a long-term sustainable partner. We both need to succeed in this partnership. And it doesn't. I think that can be the danger with it being lower volume now, as people are just like try and chase anything
Yes.
rather than sort of staying firm and true to being sustainable partners on both
Mm.
sides because it's so important. Incredible, really amazing job by you for pulling together 200 plus mobility folks from the community. What an asset! Are you going to do it again?
Yeah, I did send out a survey, and it
Yeah,
looked like quarterly was
yeah,
the
that's what I
popular
voted
one.
for.
So hopefully, yeah, I'll be sending out an invite pretty soon just to get people's calendars, and hopefully I'll
Yeah,
do it another two meetings. So if someone can't
amazing.
make it, and we'll see what's going on at the end of the quarter, and what
I
else we
love
can
that.
talk about.
Exactly one. Things never stand still in this industry, so I'm sure there'll be plenty more. And if you want to get involved and aren't already, do follow Jack on LinkedIn, and I'm sure you'll be posting about the next session. Jack, as you know, we have a tradition where the previous guest leaves a question for the next guest. And you actually have a very nicely, we've been speaking about the future of the industry today. And the question for you today is what recommendation do you have for in house global mobility folk at the start of their careers? So, far away, we're looking at GM specialists, maybe it's their first, second, or their early career. in GM entry level GM roles, what's your advice for them in terms of sort of maximizing the most from their career?
Wow, it's almost like you set me up for this. I love this
Yeah,
question
I can
because,
promise you I didn't, by the way, to the people
yeah,
listening.
it's so interesting. Now I'm going to talk about corporate global mobility managers first. Um, what I always say is like, I came in backwards,
Yeah,
okay? But a global mobility professional, I think, should use it as a stepping stone,
yeah,
okay? As a start of their career, okay? And then get into other areas. If you're with a good company, there's career path, there's
100%.
postings, there's everything else. But a lot of times people get comfortable in global mobility.
Yeah,
And that could be the wrong reason of not moving out of global mobility. Sometimes
yeah,
it's hard. So I would strongly urge people, and again, it depends on where you are in your career.
yeah,
But if you're starting out in global mobility, absolutely look into other areas once you feel
yeah,
comfortable. I think it's important to get involved in international because
yeah,
international then leads into other areas,
100%.
with regulatory affairs and, yeah, just a lot of different areas. So
Yeah,
I always say use it as a stepping
I
stone.
love that.
Don't fall for it's a nice industry and it's
Mm,
comfortable and it's fun,
yeah,
because that's not gonna. There's only a certain point that you can get when you're in
yes,
it. There's only a
exactly,
certain point. So
exactly.
that's for that. And then the folks, same thing for folks that are on the commercial side, the supplier
Yeah,
side. um, you will get stuck if you stay. I mean, not everybody, certain people do very well. But I think, again, look at it as a stepping stone to
yeah,
learn international, okay, learn, employee relations and see. And what I always say about resumes is, you can tweak them and you can make them work for other positions. You just have to
100%.
really think about it. Now with AI, it should help you too.
Yeah,
And how to maneuver and talk about what you do in
yeah.
for different jobs and how it relates.
Yeah,
So
and tease
yeah.
out some of those transferable skills, which I think,
Yes.
particularly in in-house GM roles, you have so many, right? You're dealing with vendors from early in your career. You're dealing with stressed out, high-profile employees. So
Hmm.
dealing with challenging
Exactly.
situation, all sorts of
Exactly.
benefits in there. So just constantly be thinking about how to parlay some of those situations. I think that the challenge is it's often quite case by case early in your career because it's like individuals rather than like sometimes big projects. But do think about sort of picking that up, and I love that answer. Yeah, getting that wider experience within the HR or
Yeah.
project management sphere.
Yeah.
So, wow, you really well prepped for that answer. So that was a good question for you, Jack. I've taken up far too much of your time, but I'll get in trouble if we go on anymore. But this has been so fun. Thank you for coming on, talking about the great sessions you ran and the challenges for our industry and your sort of fascinating backstory of reverse engineering into the wonderful world of global mobility. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you for coming on the show, and looking forward to having you on again in the future.
Great. Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks.
Cheers, Jack. Speak soon.
All right. Bye.